changes to the programs that they are managing.
Let me mention something that I see as a huge problem here. I understand what the warfighter is saying, but part of the problems the warfighter is having downrange today is that so much of what is being utilized downrange today was bought through the ONS and JUONS method of acquiring. Yeah. And now the soldier downrange, the lieutenant downrange, the captain downrange doesn't know that. And we're finding disconnects with much of that equipment. Because it hasn't been integrated back here, because we were reaching out for technology, you can't blame the soldier for wanting the technology. You can't blame the soldier for wanting to have the data down at the edge. But when we provide him the capability through a COTS off-the-shelf solution, because the ONS or the JUONS comes in, and it's not integrated with the rest of the system, he has no idea that the reason why it doesn't work necessarily the way it's supposed to work in all those different areas is because that integration has not taken place back home. So I think you're going to get some of this. The real challenge for us is how do we change the acquisition system to take advantage of the rapid technological change we've got today? You know, many of you have been in here and you've heard me say this time and time again, but I'm going to say it one more time. You can add iPhone, you can add Droid. But no one, I don't know of anyone, when the first iPhone came out, who could sit there and say, in just over 3 years, we're going to issue the 4th model of this phone. It's going to have a digital camera, high-definition video, and the ability to talk to somebody with a similar instrument at another location and see their face like a VTC. I talk to my son, it's something called FaceTime, okay, where I can, in fact, do a video VTC over my phone with it. Now, the acquirers always say, well, I didn't have the requirement, okay? But I don't know who can sit down and say what that instrument, let's say what a Droid is going to look like 4 years from now. I don't think you know. And I think we could get the smartest people in a room, and I challenge their ability to do that with any kind of accuracy. Now, if we're going to continue with an industrial-based acquisition process that takes 7 to 10 years to put something on the street, I really think we've basically said that we lose. We lose the ability to make use of this rapid technological change, but at the same time, that offers some real integration issues. Those pieces of equipment downrange that are COTS or off the shelf don't have a PM. So when a problem occurs with one of those pieces of equipment, it comes back to the Army, but it's basically, hey, that's not my job. Not my job. They wanted it, they got it. Somebody else needs to fix it. That to me is what we've got to figure out, how we're going to acquire into the future. And I'm a firm believer it's going to take the Big Bang Theory.
Sure.
My name is Gerald Van Ness with Vanguard Engineering, and I built a 38-foot standoff distance robotic interrogator arm to deal with IEDs. And I've talked to a lot of people, and they say there's no requirements, and they're only looking for a COTS solution. And so how do you get to talk to the right people?
I've got an answer, but it probably won't be the right one.
Come show us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We got all kind of processes that take industry ideas called the TRADOC ties process. Come show us what you got. Quite happy to look at it.
I can't imagine somebody in Giada would not be interested in something like that if it does what you say that it does.
I asked them today, and they said that there was no requirement.
Who's they?
I probably got a card.
Yeah, I'd like to see the card. I'll fix that.
I'll show it to you right after the meeting.
Okay.
I think, maybe not solution for this particular problem, but I think one of the things that the vision is for Keith Walker and the Evaluation Task Force at Bliss is to is to provide a place where folks can come with some ideas, especially the COTS kinds of ideas that you can put in the hands of soldiers on a regular basis. And I know we don't have this completely figured out, Keith, but rapidly acquire those kinds of things that you see have value, and discard those that don't have value. Perhaps be a place where multiple different operational need statements come in for a rapid decision or choice, and then the corresponding fielding for those that have merit. So I think there's a potential future solution for that. And then, on spaces is really the way that we respond to this kind of challenge today. But I think we've got a future path to address that.
All right, thanks.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to have a whole brigade down there, and that's why I'm so excited about this this Common Operating Environment Architecture piece of paper that we've gotten out, because it literally sets the left limits and the right limits. What we found with most of the systems that we've got is that they're tied to the network in some way. And what was kind of amazing is that we did not understand the full impact of the dismantling of FCS. We didn't totally understand what it meant when FCS went from what was going to be the objective force down to 15 brigades. And we did not totally understand what it meant when FCS, or many of the programs, the pieces of FCS, went away. Part of the capability portfolio reviews is we've had an opportunity to look at the network, that which is defined by the network, but then we find many things that many of us, quite frankly, didn't realize had to tie into the network, and in some instances, we found that some people were stovepiped so much so that they were developing different networks than the network we were developing to tie their systems into a network, not necessarily our network. And that's really what's exciting about this to me, is this is a document that will tell industry, hey, this is your left limit, this is your right limit. If you fall out of either side, we don't really want to talk to you. It's going to tell those systems that we've got on board right now, hey, guess what? It's time to get with this and change your system so they work within this operating environment. And if they don't, they will have less relevance in the future than they have today. And with that, we hope that the brigade at Bliss that Keith will have at his disposal will be the place where developers can go and bring their systems and allow real soldiers in real combat units with an amazing training area to be able to test the value to the individual soldier and ensure that whatever it is integrated into our network.
Just one quick question or comment. Colonel Jim Althouse, and good afternoon, gentlemen. I just came back from your deployment in Iraq from the STACA, which was part of AMC's Science Technology Advisor. And a lot of the information about JUONSs and ONSs and pieces of technology and the process the engineers forward is very good. And that process worked, and sometime I hope to elaborate on those in some published articles. But the key factor I ran into there, and the key factor when I was commander of Proving Ground, is a lack of soldier involvement during the developmental process of any item, whether it's new technology or the M1 tank. The soldiers are gone. They're away from those organizations. You can get them through TSARC process. Is there a way to bring the soldiers back into some of that in a small piece, back in the developmental process, either like at the Proving Grounds at Yuma, Aberdeen Test Center? They're gone. I mean, they're just not there. We used to rely on previous experience, military officers and NCOs who retired or left the service and came back and working. So I think that's one of the issues that could possibly be addressed, to look into that, to get that soldier feedback, because when it's deployed, it's too late. And the operational test is something completely different. It's the developmental pieces where you can really make those impacts. Some way to look at that, I think, would be something worthwhile. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody here disagrees with you, and I think that's really the purpose of the Evaluation Task Force at Bliss, is being stood up to do exactly those kinds of things. They've recently run the EIBCT tests. They've done some network displays or demos for us. There's an enormous capability when, as you said, you put capabilities in the hands of soldiers and they can tell you, not only does this work or it doesn't work, but even if it works, we don't want it, for example. So, or we found something else that works better. And I think that's That's the power, just to echo what you're saying, that's the power of putting it in the hands of soldiers. We agree. Dan?
Dan Cox from Boeing. I'd like to thank Generals Pillsbury and Phillips for highlighting two great Boeing products in the Chinook and Apache to start off with.
We're the parts.
The biplane Boeing product?
I noticed, General Bain, I noticed from your chart the tagline that said buy fewer more often. And it struck me that if you take that to the logical conclusion, then you're going to have different capabilities stretched throughout the force in so doing. Now, in the old Army, General Chiarelli, when you were on your M1 tank, I was still on my M60 tank in the active force, and we had a guard that was a strategic reserve. And we accepted those kind of differences in capabilities by saying there were tiered readiness, and the Cold War war plans were obviously adjusted to take that in consideration. Now, you've moved away from that. We've moved to modularity, where we're talking about plug-and-play brigades, if you will. Now, I know that we're rethinking that some. I saw an interview that you did that talked about the truck problem, for instance, and how in the old divisional structure you had just your truck centralized, and you could get those out and push them out to as you need them, rather than trying to keep similar capabilities in a wide range of units. But the chief said at lunchtime that we're going to keep the guard as an operational reserve. So the question is, how do you deal with this now if you're going to buy fewer more often than a wide-ranging capabilities? You have an ARFOGEN system where you expect that you're going to have similar capabilities in those units as you rotate them through those systems and then deploy them on a periodic basis, whether they be active or reserve.
I'll take a kick. You want to go first?
I'd be glad to.
Go ahead.
Great tee up, Dan. I appreciate your teeing that up. You have to, first of all, kind of look at where are we today? With an acquisition system that said, I'm going to buy one of these widgets for the whole Army for the next 40 years. What did we end up with? We have every Stryker brigade that's different, every IBCT that's different, every HBCT that's different. So what future environment are you suggesting that's going to be worse than where we are today? That would be my first comment. See yourself. What I'm suggesting is a managed process here of ARFOGEN-driven set of incremental capabilities where we know what we're putting into the field. And we're allowing for growth, and we're setting up contracts on a decision cycle that'll give senior leadership the visibility of what kind of incremental capabilities and technology to put in units in a managed fashion as opposed to where we are today. Sir?
Yeah, I'll take it one step further. I mean, when you and I had tanks back then, they were our tanks. And if anybody ever talked about hot seating those tanks and passing that tank from tanker to tanker, that was kind of a red line. We are past that. You know, a lot of folks look at us tankers and say, you guys are irrelevant now. There's not a single U.S. Army tank in Afghanistan. Well, I kind of have a different look at that. I just love the fact that the 82nd and the 101st are moving folks, 12 folks around the battlefield when you count the total weight of 3 MRAP ATVs fully combat loaded at about 60 tons. That's what they're doing. And quite frankly, I think the terms, and this is me speaking, this is not the United States Army, this is Pete Chiarelli speaking. As I look at the real lessons learned out of this fight, they are that the IBCT and HBCT, although very nice for us old Cold War warriors to talk about, that the fighting unit of the future may be a single unit that is equipped for the fight it goes into, because that's exactly what's happening. It happened in Iraq, and it's happening in Afghanistan today. The problem I have with the network in Afghanistan is the fact that it only exists in Afghanistan. It doesn't exist back here because of the ability to get COTS. I promise you the 101st and the 82nd aren't necessarily going to want to bring that 60 tons for every 12 people back home with them, okay, when they come back home to Fort Campbell and Fort Bragg. But the fact of the matter is that the next time we send them to Afghanistan or someplace else, I just can't imagine a combat environment we would go into in what is today a nonlinear fight, not the old linear fight that you and I grew up with, but in a nonlinear fight where we're not going to have to provide that kind of force protection to our soldiers. And it's not just to save arms and legs and lives, it's also to maintain the offensive spirit they need to fight in that kind of environment and know that they can get from point A to point B at that dismount point where they dismount and conduct operations, get to that point safely.
Thank you. Thanks for the great job you're all doing for us and for our Army.
Thank you, sir.
Can I pitch in, Dan, and I know you know this, but for everybody else, there's a highly readable bestseller called The Army Equipping Strategy that's, that we published. It's now about a year old, Tom, and we're about to update and publish the next one that kind of tells the same story. So stay tuned for the very next version to come out that will address many of the key insights that were discussed here.
And unless you have a pocket protector, the common operating environment will in fact put you to sleep quicker
It will.
than our modernization strategy.
It will.
Sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Bob Schultz, RDE Command. I grew up in the Acquisition Corps, retired a few years ago, and General Phillips talked a little bit about regrowing, redoing the acquisition workforce. What my question really is going to be focused on is on how you promote program managers who are willing to take risk. I think part of the problem that I experienced as an Acquisition Corps officer is that taking risk once you have a program of record with a prime contractor is a career killer. The clear example for me, which goes a little bit towards the requirement, was the Comanche. The requirements changed and changed and changed, and then a PM came in and said, you know what, we're not going to make this. This is too high risk, costs too much money. And he was the first 06 that did make Brigadier General. He retired. That sent a message throughout the Acquisition Corps that I think was terrible, because it creates officers, leaders who are willing to really manage risk. We're risk avoidance. I think if you want to get the right systems in place, you need to promote people who are willing to get that gut feeling, understand the technology, know where to invest, where to jump on it, and go for it. And so you have to get the right people in the right place. And so my question, sir, what are you doing, what are you thinking about to get people that are willing to manage risk, really manage it, into the senior leadership positions?
Bob, great question, and glad to see you, or great to see you again. Couple of thoughts. One is, every program manager is going to have to measure risk in some way. Probably some of your best program managers are those that have the greatest challenges inside their program. And their programs may not be necessarily going so well, but it depends upon how they are managing risk internal to cost, schedule, and performance. And you got to look at all three and make sure that you're balancing that. In terms of the attributes that it goes into getting to the next level, we start looking at those young officers, as you well know, when they're majors, maybe senior captains coming into the Acquisition Corps. And it's not just your service as an 06 necessarily, but when we look at the attributes necessary for someone to make it to the highest levels of the Army, you're looking holistically and you're looking very broad. And risk is certainly a piece of that, but it's not necessarily the only piece when you look at management of a program. And I would argue that, again, as I said earlier, some of the best program managers that we have today are managing our most challenging programs, and they're balancing cost, schedule, and performance, in some cases, extraordinary ways.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? There's a corollary to that too. It also that the program manager who's not willing to accept some of that risk will devise a testing schedule that is unaffordable and makes it almost impossible for us to deliver what we said we're going to deliver at the price we said we were going to deliver it. Testing is something else that we need to really, really take a hard look at. Huge problems when you don't have testing or any testing at all, but the problems can be even greater when there is so much tied up in RDT&E that the program becomes unaffordable and unable to compete with other systems.
Sir, can I add just one comment to that, and absolutely on target? Testing is becoming essentially a high cost inside many of our programs. But the other piece of this also is we want program managers today that are willing to come forward to Army leadership and talk openly and honestly about their program and where their challenges are, so that it allows the Army to make better decisions up front and early in the process. And those are some of your best programs. If you wait until the end where you're about to enter a milestone decision and you say, I've got these 3 challenges where I can't meet these requirements, or I can't do this, or the test did this piece, then you're almost at mission failure. So we're looking for program managers, whether it's a CPR, whether it's a configuration steering board, or some kind of activity. We want them to come forward and share their honest assessment of their program holistically in terms of cost, schedule, and performance.
Well, if I could, I want to check and see if the 25th Infantry Division 10-miler team is awake and still with us. You guys still here? All right, good. And if you have any modernization ideas, you can talk to us afterward, okay? Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being part of this panel and for sharing your thoughts and wisdom and ideas on the way ahead. And thanks, everyone, for attending.
Good seeing you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.